Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. On our hazardous weather graphic, wind advisory here continues out for the eastern Alaska range, mostly west of the Toke Cutoff, on over to Dehne, possibly Healy. That's for the winds that'll kick up. They're already gusts to 55 miles an hour there this afternoon from some of the reporting stations. And that'll continue through tonight and tomorrow night as well in that area for, again, winds 15 to 25 or so, or 30 with gusts 55 miles an hour. And the other warning is a high wind warning out here that goes along with hurricane force wind warning here for the western Aleutians. That's out for the remainder of the afternoon, overnight tonight for the far western Aleutians out there. Winds gusting up over 40 miles an hour now at Shemya with the approach of that strong system off to the southwest. And it'll continue to come up and look for gusts to 80 miles an hour overnight tonight with that system. And that'll push rapidly eastward. That'll be actually not so much with the front coming through, but with the main low center tracking by. And then that front will push off into the central Aleutians later on tonight and tomorrow. And satellite imagery showing the cloud shield here associated with the front that's bringing the winds up now over the Shemya Attu area. And that's going to move rapidly eastward here. And the high wind warning is going to be mostly associated with the main low center farther back to the southwest. They'll be coming up behind that later on or this evening and overnight tonight. Otherwise, we have this low pressure center near the Alaska Peninsula. And that very slow moving front now as it bumps up against upper level high pressure here to the north and northeast of it, and starting to pull off to the, mainly to the east as a portion of the jet breaks through underneath the upper level high, and another branch taking off to the northwest. So that's tending to stretch this thing apart. And rain, only 1/100 of an inch there at Kodiak State Airport today, but AKwx had about 1/4 of an inch of precipitation. Otherwise, main low center here on Alaska picked up 0.8 of an inch, and these are daytime amounts for Monday. Today, not 24-hour amounts. But again, 0.8 of an inch at Unalaska. AKwx picked up about, as I mentioned, 1/4 of an inch in St. Paul. That narrow band of clouds there, they had about 1/10 of an inch of precipitation in that location. Otherwise, winds with us continued strong again with gusts to 60 miles an hour, both at Platinum, Cape Newenham there on the southwest coast. Otherwise, let's see, gusts to 40 to 45 miles an hour occurred at St. George Island, as well as Igigik there, southwest of King Salmon. And gusts to, as I mentioned, eastern Alaska range here, where the advisories at were gusting up to about 55 miles per hour, and also quite windy up over the northwest interior with Kotzebue seeing gusts 45 miles an hour, and Red Dog gusts as high as 55 miles an hour up in that area. Another sunny day here over the southeast coast with winds not too bad and sunny warm conditions. Tanana Valley, Fairbanks reaching 71 degrees, or I'm sorry, not 71, reached 67 this afternoon. The record high actually is 72 degrees for this date, October 1st, set back in 2003. So it can still get quite nice up in the interior valleys here, even on the first day of October. And you'll probably see another repeat of that tomorrow and possibly even the next day here as this system really has trouble pushing any farther to the northeast. And the last loop here showing that low center gradually sliding eastward here. And again, the split flow with one branch pushing off to the east-southeast, this one going off to the northwest, but the entire pattern shifting eastward. So we're going to see increasing clouds, increasing chances of rain, mainly on the southern Kenai Peninsula and over the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, and some rain back off to the northwest. Pretty light amounts, though, less than 1/10 of an inch. For tonight, that front does advance right onto the southwest coast here and bring a better chance of rain to the northeast part of Kodiak Island, Fognac Island, southern Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, into Kamishak Bay, Iliamna, back across possibly into the southern Kuskokwim Valley, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Low slowly weakening, slides up the Alaska Peninsula. Stays breezy here for the eastern Aleutians, those northwest winds, gusts 40 to 45 miles an hour, slowly diminishing. And then the low center tracking in towards Shimia. That's where you're going to see the 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts. And the front with that will be coming eastward later tonight. As you can see, they'll be pushing rapidly into the central Aleutians, probably passing Adak shortly after midnight with strong winds and rain. Strong winds falling in behind. Gale and storm force westerlies will be following that system in behind. This low weakening, pulling off to the north now, and almost weakening into a trough front, bringing rain across Kodiak Island for tonight, and again into southern Cook Inlet. Stays fair over the northern interior, central interior as well as the southeast coast. High pressure just east of the Panhandle offshore flow keeps the low clouds and any fog well off the coast, so clear skies there. And still a little breezy in the channel areas, but nothing serious. Looking at the forecast for tomorrow, this system slides, well, it doesn't actually push too far to the north here, really slowing down along the southwest coast. This one's starting to overtake it and catch up. And rain, wind, Pribilof Islands, southward to the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. Front weakening now as it pulls away from the main low center that's hanging back out to the west and pulling a little to the north. And this week, frontal boundary here really not as strong as it looks the way I've drawn it. Just some areas of light rain, fog, and drizzle. Pretty gusty on the winds, though, for the northern Bering Sea to St. Lawrence Island, but less wind along the southwest coast. Really, this portion has no significant winds at all associated with it, and only light rain that'll push up the east side of the western Alaska Range. Another sunny, warm day in the interior, all the way out to the Arctic coast. VFR conditions, mostly clear skies, and little, if any, in the way of low clouds and fog up in that location. Same thing for the Panhandle. Outlook for Wednesday, that front, what's left of it, dissipating here as a trough, keeps a chance of moisture in along Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula area, possibly over to Cordova. Whatever falls will be quite light. And this trying to push in toward the Panhandle doesn't quite make it. Some of that moisture will probably get in there on Thursday early, but nothing significant at this point in time. That front overtakes the northern portion, just washes out completely. This one replaces it, so another day of wind and rain into the southwest coast. Pretty strong winds, rain chances increase up there, St. Lawrence Island on up to the Bering Strait, but not much of any in the way of precipitation gets into the Seward Peninsula and just mostly over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, Bristol Bay, periods of rain and gusty winds will be diminishing once the front pushes through, but still strong gale, possible storm force winds here out of the west and northwest, diminishing over the western Aleutians late, but on the south side of that 960 millibar low, storm force winds probably near or north across the southern Bering Sea, just north of the Aleutians. And for the forecast lows for tonight, again dropping down with the clear skies, upper teens to lower 20s, eastern interior. Upper 20s, eastern Arctic coast to mid-30s on the west side, and then we got mid-40s here at Kotzebue Sound, upper 40s for Nome, mid to upper 40s all the way down into Bristol Bay where it's a little closer to 50. Same thing for the Aleutians, Kodiak Island as well. South central Alaska, 30s to lower 40s, and mostly in the 30s to near 40 for the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow, 55 to 60s, 1 or 2 there for the southeast coast, another sunny day. Susitna Valley, 50s, some areas could push 60 degrees, upper 50s also for Bristol Bay. Tanana Valley, mid-50s, maybe again pushing into the lower 60s, and then cooling into the 30s on the eastern Arctic coast, but above freezing 30s, and the lows for the following morning back into the upper teens to mid-20s here through the eastern interior, a little bit milder in the eastern Arctic coast, 40s here in the southwest areas, and upper 40s for the Aleutians for the overnight lows, still around near 50 there for the Alaska Peninsula, but a little cooler than it will be tomorrow morning. And the southeast coast here, again, 30s to maybe lower 40s, warmest out along the coast. And then your highs for Wednesday afternoon, 30s eastern Arctic coast, lower to mid-50s Tanana Valley, in the 50s for the Panhandle, and lower 50s in the Aleutians, and mid-50s for south central Alaska.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, band IFR with that front coming eastward here into the central Aleutians. And then the old weakening one, leaving some IFR hanging up here from Togiak Bay on up to Gamble. They're just catching Nunivak Island, well east of the Pribilofs now. And marginal VFR in Bristol Bay, IFR south side of the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutian Range, Kodiak Island, on up and increasing on the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, also southern and eastern Kenai Peninsula, and that'll slide on up into western Prince William Sound around Passage Canal. Otherwise VFR interior all the way out to the Arctic coast as well as the Panhandle. Tomorrow afternoon, same pattern, no change. VFR for the southeast coast, Prince William Sound now. VFR except over toward Passage Canal and then on down the Kenai Peninsula there. Kodiak, some IFR. No change for the western Alaska Range. Good VFR interior on out to the Arctic Ocean. And now just a band really weakening now as far as the IFR goes. The original one dissipates into marginal VFR with some IFR over the Auckland and Kilbuck Mountains and also up around St. Lawrence Island. And then marginal for the central Aleutians becoming VFR out to the Shimei and Attu area from Amchitka west. And then the next morning, areas of marginal VFR, not too bad into the western Aleutians here, sliding up to about ADAC or so, and a swath of VFR in between that batch and this one here along the southwest coast. So some IFR south side of the Alaska Peninsula and over the southwest mountains, along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, all the way down to Kamishak Bay and the Barrens. Marginal VFR, Kodiak, VFR in the interior now, and much of the Arctic coast and North Slope. Could be a little bit of marginal stuff on the east side there, but nothing too extensive. And VFR for the Panhandle, that lasts into the afternoon. On Wednesday here, a couple more VFR days coming up for the southeast coast, as well as all of interior Alaska, including the Arctic coast, North Slope. Marginal VFR here, southwest coast, St. Lawrence Island, just maybe catching Nome, possibly, otherwise Seward Peninsula VFR. And no change for the western Alaska Range as well as the Kenai Peninsula. IFR kind of on the increase there, Kodiak Island, especially central and south side. And marginal VFR over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, but VFR from Unalaska on up to Nelson Lagoon, Sand Point. And for passes tomorrow, Anatuvik and Adigan, both VFR, as well as, well, Lake Clark and Merrill. Marginal VFR, but IFR increasing on the eastern approaches of both passes, probably during the morning hours and persisting for the next couple of days. And then for rainy, VFR becoming marginal throughout the day, and windy stays VFR, and the clear skies there. Isabel, same forecast. VFR, Mentasta. Tanita, seeing an increase in the clouds, definitely cloudier, but of the VFR variety. And for Portage, marginal VFR, IFR developing on the eastern entrance. Chilkoot and White, 2 more days actually of VFR flying for those passes. And for the freezing levels, upper level high kind of up to the north here, and we've got the 10,000 foot freezing levels up in that area. Otherwise, that upper low and some cooler air punching in underneath, advancing northeastward. So coming down to 6,000 feet here, southern Alaska, and the cold air is still east of the border of the Panhandle, quite a gradient across there, supporting that northerly jet aloft. Out to the west, warm air trying to nudge in ahead of that next big storm out there. And for the icing, moderate chop, or icing, not turbulence, considerable moderate rime icing here coming into the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, just isolated moderate rime, eastern Aleutians, Pribilofs, advancing to the Alaska Peninsula, and then a less significant area here with that dying area of moisture, Kodiak Island up into Cook Inlet and in across the southwest interior, tapering off to St. Lawrence Island. Looking at the jet stream, upper level ridge kind of pulling off to the north a little bit, and that allowing some things to break through underneath. Still have a split in the jet here, very strong, 160 knots just south of the Aleutians, splitting right in this area. So these fronts coming in, weakening and slowly advancing eastward and then kind of hanging up. And then the upper trough here, British Columbia, strong 100 knot jet right across the Panhandle. But at 9,000 feet, not the case. Slight winds there under high pressure at that elevation, 25 to 30 southern Alaska, 50 knot westerlies, high as 55 knots. And then for 3,000 feet, about the same pattern, 45 to 50 out over the Aleutians, southerlies 35 to 45. Turbulence, occasional moderate chop here in the west coast and the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining us again talking about the augmented reality sandbox is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. And he's actually talking about a project from AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. A lot of acronyms, but some really fun stuff today, right, Eric?
You bet. We've got a learning tool that is a tool that's fun to use, and it really has a relevance to actually daily lives of anyone who goes outside and sees lumpy topography in Alaska. We've got a lot of mountains and such. You know, when I was younger and go on your first hike in the hills, say, you're given, maybe you're in the Boy Scouts or you get at the kiosk at the trailhead, a topographic map, a flat piece of paper with all these lines on it, bullseyes, long lines that curve back on themselves, say, perhaps things that look like this. A quadrangle or a topographic map. We've got here just to illustrate a couple of examples near Denali. Alaska has so much topography, so many mountains. And what are all these lines that we see? It can be tough to know what this means the first time you look at it. What we've got, all these lines represent lines of where the elevation of the topography goes through a certain level above sea level, say that this line represents where the mountains have gone from below 1,000 feet, mean sea level, up through 1,000 feet and above. That's your 1,000-foot contour. And when the mountain keeps going up, you're up to 1,200 feet, 1,400 feet, and so on. And that's how you get this little bullseye around the peak of a mountain.
Kind of makes layered slices, right?
Kind of like layered slices. Nice way to look at that. And when you see the lines are closer together, you're going up more steeply. If the mountain rises more slowly, it takes you longer in horizontal space to go through those different vertical increments. So
that is really hard to visualize.
Right. Imagine you're looking at a 2D piece of paper, two-dimensional piece of paper, but you're trying to understand what the three-dimensional world looks like. Well, enter the augmented reality sandbox. Yes, what is that? It is right here. We have the sandbox with us today, Sandbox 2.0, portable version. Built up at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we've got a couple of folks helping out today.
Let's see, Alana Valaji, and she's a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. If you want to give us a thumbs up there, Alana, thanks for helping us out today. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator from AKwx, also helping us out today. Thanks, Courtney.
And this tool here has a Microsoft Kinect to sense the level of sand in this sandbox. And then the Kinect feeds its information into a computer that then sends a signal to a projector to draw the appropriate topographic lines on this topography. The fun thing about this, as we can see here, is that the sandbox and its Kinect and its projector, they all work as a team. So here we've got a mountain in the middle of the sandbox. What if we took down the mountain to some degree? Watch as the software responds and redraws the topography.
Kind of a caldera forming there.
There you go, And what's fun about the sandbox too is it knows that gravity flows downhill, and we've got some water that's actually down in the lowest elevations. And what's happening now is we're making it rain a little bit. We'll fill up rain into that elevated lake bed, that caldera, as you said. And so now water is pooled up there. And what if you gouged out an outlet channel?
Glacial dam release.
There you go. The water flows out. What we're seeing here is a tool that allows people to touch and connect, Microsoft Connect, RRR, to connect two-dimensional topographic maps like what we have here, these flat things on a piece of paper, to the real three-dimensional world. I think this sandbox's real particular application as a learning tool to young people is, what does a two-dimensional map mean when it's trying to represent the three-dimensional world? This sandbox is kind of both at once. It's actually three-dimensional, lumpy topography there, the sand, but it's got these lines drawn on the three-dimensional sand that would be on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Wow, that is a huge leap from the learning that we experienced when we were younger to how children and even adults are visualizing in these new forms of technology. Allows that to kind of reshape their thinking and visualize this in a very useful and absolutely hands-on way. It's amazing.
It's a hands-on tool, and
it's hard for me to sit here and not go play with that.
Well, that's what happened at GINA, up at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, when the first model was being made, the prototype with plywood and such. We had professional adult professor types had heard about this, and they came by because they wanted to see how it worked.
Okay.
And everyone becomes that idealistic, wonder-filled youngster.
Sure.
And you just can't help but play with that, and to see how it reacts in time, and
Right.
it's a dynamic learning tool, and it responds.
That's exactly the word.
And you wonder what applicabilities beyond a teaching tool for topography can it have. You can see how in Alaska we have inundation mapping is an issue. If you had water slosh inland, say in a coastal flooding event on the western coast of Alaska or the Arctic coast, you could see this. The concept is illustrated here as an introductory learning method. I think this is a potentially good outreach tool for all of us in Alaska.
Okay, so not only just a topographical sense, a mapping sense, maybe something that leads into understanding of how geographic information systems work with GIS, but also geology, if we wanted to get into kind of the formations and the bigger land masses and the representation of the 2D map. We could go into hydrology, which is very important in Alaska, of course. And even just understanding the weather sense. Mounding up a big pile of sand could be that Arctic high pressure system sitting on top of Fairbanks, and the voids would be low pressure systems. This can go a lot of different directions.
Yes, exactly. It's not just landforms, but pressure has contours of high pressure and low pressure. And I wish I had this kind of a learning tool when I was taking Meteorology 101 back 25 years ago.
Wow.
Would have been helpful, I think.
Probably would have gotten a better grade, yeah. Okay, thank you so much for coming by, Eric, and Alana and Courtney, thank you so much for your help there in the sandbox. We are going to play in the sandbox a little bit more coming up tomorrow on our next edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We hope you join us for that. In the meantime, make sure you go to alaska.edu/EPSCOR. That's alaska.edu EPSCOR to learn more information about what we're doing with this augmented reality sandbox around Alaska. We'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Facts. And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis, not much different from yesterday, although this gap between the eastern ice field here and the island of ice to the west seems to be continuing to narrow. Otherwise, still have some patchy areas of new ice along the eastern stretch of the Arctic coast from roughly the Prudhoe Bay area on over, and slowly new ice forming up there to the north. Coastal water forecast, southeast coast, on the coast, east-southeast 20 knots, diminishing to 15 knots on the north coast, 6 to 7 foot seas. South 15 knots, central northern inside waters, 3 foot seas, northwest at 10 for Clarence Strait. For Wednesday, those become southwest at 10 knots. Real light winds now for Stevens Passage, and south 15 for Lynn Canal. South 15 on the south coast, south to southeast at 20 on the north coast, so those seas at 8 feet. East 20 tomorrow, Prince William Sound. Southeast 20 for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Small craft advisories for the western zone, and gale force winds. Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, seas 12 to 14 feet. Small craft advisory, Southern Cook Inlet with 7 foot seas. And Wednesday, winds stay out of the northeast for Cook Inlet, 15 knots north of the Forelands. Southern Cook Inlet, northeast 20, and east 30 with 10 foot seas for Kamishak Bay. Southeast 25 for the Barrens. East 20 to 25 knots here for the North Gulf Coast. East 20, Prince William Sound. East 25 for Shelikof Strait tomorrow, otherwise lighter southerlies here on the east side of Kodiak. Sitkinak to Castle Cape southwest at 25. Gales for the Alaska Peninsula, southerlies 35 to 40 knots, south at about 20 for Bristol Bay at 7 foot seas. And then on Wednesday, back into the gales there for Bristol Bay, south 40 knots, 9 foot seas, southwest 35 with 12 to 16 foot seas for the peninsula, turning south here from Castle Cape to Sitkinak at 35 knots, 30 knot winds east side of Kodiak, east 25, Shelikof Strait, heading on out to the west there. Eastern Aleutians, south to southwest 40 to 45 knots tomorrow, good gale force winds there, and seas 12 to 17 feet, 35 to 40 knots southwest winds for the central Aleutians with seas up to 18 feet. And we've got storm warnings for west winds, 55 knots for the western Aleutian seas, 28 feet. Those will come down to about 50 knots, but still storm warnings here for the western and central Aleutians for west to southwest, 50 knots, and southwest 40 to 45 here for Unmak Island, and 35 to 40 knots for Unalaska Island out of the southwest seas, over 20 feet here. with the Tuesday outlook for the southwest coast, or the Tuesday forecast for tomorrow, southwest coast. Gale force winds here, 35 to 40 knots right out of the south, 10-foot seas. South 35, 13-foot seas for the Pribilofs, 40 knots, St. Matthew Island. And east to southeast, 30 knots, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island. And gale force winds for St. Lawrence Island on Wednesday, east 35 knots, southeast 30, north of Nunivak Island. Gale force winds south 35, south of the island, southwest 35 for the Pribilofs, those seas 18 feet. And for the eastern Boulevard Sea coast, east winds 30 knots again tomorrow, seas 9 to 10 feet. Small craft advisory, easterlies there for the central coast, and then southeast 15 on the west side, back up to 25 knots from the southeast, Cape Beaufort on down to the Bering Strait. And for Wednesday, east 25 knots, Wales up to Cape Thompson, and then 20 knots on the west side, east 30 knots, central and eastern Arctic coast, so a pretty uniform wind pattern continuing there, seas 10 to 11 feet. And for tonight, stays clear up there, all the way into the interior, increasing clouds here, thicken and lower, and then eventually get into the rain, southern Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, and along the southwest coast. And the storm force winds push eastward into the central Aleutians tonight, along with the rain, stays fair over the Panhandle. And for tomorrow, high pressure keeps for a mostly sunny day. Might start seeing some low clouds and fog develop maybe late, possibly, but nothing too serious. Fair over the interior, and those winds still pretty gusty right along through the eastern Alaska Range passes. And rain, Kodiak Island front pushing eastward here, kind of hung up on the southwest coast due to high pressure to the northeast, and that keeps it mostly sunny over the interior. This front catching up now, driving eastward, but weakening slowly. Gale force winds, rain, the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, Pribilofs, storm force westerlies on the south side of that low center with periods of rain. And then for Wednesday, right up to the southwest coast with rain and wind, fair and sunny over the northern interior. Panhandle sunny again. And that's all I've got time for. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.